Hey, I hope everybody's doing good because I want to live off the grid. Have you ever thought about that? Um, I've got a lot of friends who talk about it. I do know one person that totally lives off the grid, and she comes back into, if you want to say, civilization like twice a year to just pick things up and to, kind of find out what's going on because she does not even have the internet or anything like that. And I found this out through one of her brother's friends. Anyhow, today's conversation is going to be with Larry Weingarten, and we're going to talk about living off the grid. We're going to talk about what is good for, staying off the grid, how to make your home efficient and sufficient. And one of the things that he really talks about is hot water tanks. Yep, hot water tank. Can you believe that? I didn't even know all the stuff that Larry was talking about for hot water tanks. Now, if you think about it, hot water tanks, we use hot water all the time. If your hot water tank gets old, you replace it. It costs kind of a lot of money sometimes, but he was saying you can actually prolong the life of that hot water tank for a very long time just by replacing this rod. And he's going to talk about that. And I was like, what do you mean this rod thing? And it doesn't cost that much money and you can do it on your own? Yep, you can do it on your own, but you want to make sure that you do it right. So think about this. Hot water tank. If your hot water tank is bad, it's going to work that much harder. It's going to cost more energy. It's going to take that energy that's on your grid if you're using a battery system to charge everything, if you're on solar and stuff like that. So that's super important as far as that hot water tank goes. So again, we're going to talk a lot about hot water tanks. Trust me, it's interesting and really living off the grid. So I hope you enjoy this podcast, and please remember to like, share, and comment, and spread the word. So thank you very much for doing that. And before we get started, remember, please be a responsible pet owner and have your pets spayed or neutered. It's pronounced Weingarten, right?
You got
Larry Weingarten.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very simple for your website, LarryWeingarten.com.
I learned from people that your best card is your name instead of coming up with some fancy name that people then have to put that together with who you are. Just skip all that. Make it easy for people.
Yes, but you are also known as what? The hot water nerd.
I call myself that. Other people may call me other things, but yes. There is a strange but elite group of hot water nerds. And
Well, yeah, go ahead.
well, and we help each other as we can. It's interesting that hot water is a huge field. I'm only good in my little aspect of it, but other people who understand codes or other kinds of physics, I can bring to them what really happens in the field because they don't know that. And I do. And I was a member of the National Association of Corrosion Engineers. So I look at things in slow motion and watch that plug of rust build up at improper fittings and stuff like this. So I can say, you really should, instead of putting copper or brass right into your steel tank, use a different kind of fitting so, that doesn't cause you trouble later.
Can we talk a little bit about this? And then I want to go on to the off the grid topic and,
Sure.
find out from you, what
Sure.
is living off the grid? And is it about being self-sufficient and things like that? But I want to find out about this hot water stuff. And like I said, corrosion, hot water tanks specifically, because a lot of us have hot water tanks, and I know that there's a lot of visits coming around at a time that it might be time to replace things, or we do see the corrosion down at the bottom, but we don't do anything about it, or maybe we replace it ourselves, and like you said, we're putting wrong fittings together.
Well,
Tell me about this.
and I think one of the biggest secrets hiding in front of us is that I can show you how to get 50 years, 50 years out of a standard water heater. Most people will say 10 to 12 years, 9 to 12 years is the average lifetime. Get used to it, buy a new tank every so often. I'm saying you don't have to do that. So no leak damage, none of that stuff. You can, there are ways if you pay attention to make heaters last an extraordinarily long time. I've done it many times.
Can people correct things right now if they have a home that's, say it's the hot water tank's been there for 10 years or something like that? Can they
Yes.
do something now?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the basic elevator talk about this is every glass line tank, which is most heaters, have in them a device, a thing called a sacrificial anode rod. It's a magnesium or aluminum rod. You unscrew it, which is tricky. Sometimes they're very hard, but you unscrew it and it will tell you, you can read them. It tells you the condition inside of the tank. And you put a new anode rod in. I avoid aluminum rods because I think, well, because basically aluminum is a neurotoxin. We don't want that in our water. We don't even want to shower in that water. It's not good for our health. Magnesium is. I believe in over 300 processes in the body, magnesium is used. So more of that's fine. In an old tank, I'll pull the rod out, look at it. It'll tell me a little bit about the condition of the tank. Even if it generally starts out as like a 3/4 inch diameter solid steel rod or solid magnesium rod with a wire running down the middle of it that holds it together. The magnesium corrodes away before steel does in water. It's like a battery. It's an electrochemical reaction. So as long as there's magnesium on that rod, the tank can't rust. Pretty much,
Okay.
it can't rust enough to measure. Very, very slow rate of rusting. So, okay, put a new rod in. Even if the old rod is totally gone and you just pull out a plug, look around the tank for fittings, look in the combustion chamber. If there are no wet spots, no obvious leakage, put a new rod in, you can keep the old tank going. Even if there's already rusting going on, this will stop it. So you can get decades more out of an old tank.
So it's like these steel rods, like so that is maybe magnesium coated, and it's kind of like a pH balance for water in the hot tubs and pools or something like that,
Well,
where it releases something, or
actually, this is just like a battery creates an electrochemical reaction, and we're interested in that 1.5 volts that the D cell gives us. A water heater is like a big, very heavy battery. It puts two different metals together in water, and there's a thing called the galvanic scale, which measures every metal's desire to turn back into its ore, to rust or corrode. Magnesium wants to corrode more than steel does. I'm using plumber's terms for a fairly scientific thing here, but magnesium, by corroding, drives the rusting reaction backwards in steel. It won't allow steel to fail, to turn back into iron ore or into rust. So it's pretty neat. This is a technology that's been around. Sir Humphrey Davy discovered it in 1832 for preventing corrosion on boats.
wow.
And there's a
Um,
whole thing called the National Association of Corrosion Engineers. I was a member of them for years. They look at all the things we can do to make bridges last and buried pipelines, any metal thing. They can use these tricks, anode rods and things. There are different types to make things last. And
wow.
they're used in water heaters so that, we don't need to like have water heaters that themselves weigh 300 or 500 pounds. They don't need to be that thick. We can make them thin and put a glass coating on so there's very little exposed steel. And there will always be imperfections. So they put an anode in the tank to protect all those places. Now you've got a long-lived water heater.
That's fascinating. Who would have thought that hot water tanks could be so fascinating and science behind it? I
They
just thought
are. I mean,
there's a tank with water.
I mean, just I got really curious about this stuff, so I began collecting old water heaters from all over the world to see how they were designed, what made them work. And I had old cast iron water heaters, old things with copper coils and big flames inside. I had things that actually mixed flames and water together. These were the original condensing, highly efficient water heaters from like the late 1800s. They had water heaters that efficient. So there's so much to be learned by looking at the past.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah, water heating's fun.
I'm going to put this in, though. Folks, what we're talking about, water heaters, and we're talking about the rod. Larry, you can probably do it on your own, but you got to be careful. And
I'll just say that there are some real basic things here. You're working with electricity or you're working with gas, and you don't want to die. So turn the water heat, if it's gas, turn it to the pilot position. There's a little control box on the bottom front of it. Don't turn it off, because if you turn it off, you'll have to relight it. And sometimes old heaters don't like that. So just turn it to pilot. Now it won't fire up. There won't be any problems. If you're working with an electric heater, which is about half the heaters in the U.S., it matters to turn off the circuit breaker, but don't believe it. It may be labeled wrong. Get what's called a sniffer. It's a device that it's a non-contact device that you can check and make sure that there's no power there. Real important to, let's stay safe first. And the two basic things about maintaining a water heater, anode rod, and the temperature and pressure relief valve. I'm in the Central California area, and it varies a lot, but it can be pretty hard here. 1 out of 4 temperature and pressure relief valves failed the test of simply open the valve, let it run, let it snap close, and it should stop dripping. If it does that, great, but 1 out of 4 didn't. Of those, 1 out of 10 was plug solid. So in my area, 1 out of 40 water heaters has no protection at all from overheating and blowing up. And by blowing up, a standard 30-gallon water heater, when it explodes, when you turn all that water into steam, has roughly the force of 2 sticks of dynamite. 2 million foot-pounds of force. It's enough to level a small home.
Wow.
So it's important.
Right.
So that's why I sort of harp about check the temperature and pressure relief valve. A lot of people won't do it because it might leak. Replace it. It's a lot less problem than rebuilding your house.
Yes. Do they go from the top where the valve is located?
They're within the top 6 inches of the tank. So it's either on the flat top of the tank or within 6 inches of the top on the side.
Okay. Well, folks, if you don't feel comfortable, definitely use a professional.
I will, if I can show it off.
Yeah.
In 1992, I wrote the water heater workbook. You can get that, and that'll tell people how to deal with it in some detail.
Yeah, and they could go to your website and get that too, right?
Yeah.
At LarryWeingarten.com.
Yeah.
And they could find that there. I saw that on your website.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Larry, so I know this is really fascinating about hot water tanks and things like that, but you also talk about living off the grid, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know A few things about that. We hear that term, I'm going to go off the grid. So I want to know in general terms, what is off the grid or living off the grid? What does that mean? And why would somebody or why do people want to do that?
Okay, well, let's start with the real basic defining the terms. The grid, there are a lot of grids that we're tied in with. When people say they want to go off the grid, almost always they're talking about being off of the power grid. There are plenty of other grids:
Mhm.
medical grid, the tax grid, financial grid, the road grid. There are all sorts of grids, the food grid. But but being off the power grid means you're no longer subject to raising rates, or if the power goes out on the grid, doesn't bother you. You've got your own, what would be called a micro grid. So in my case, I built my own house a little over 20 years ago at this point, and I put some photovoltaic panels on the roof and some batteries as storage and an inverter. It means that I need to look at gauges and things every day, but I spend a few minutes every day, really not more than 2 minutes.
Mm.
And I figure, if I was paying for power, how much would my hourly rate be? I'm getting a really decent rate of pay by spending these few minutes. The other thing is, I built a long ways away from the nearest power poles, 2/3 of a mile. I would,
Oh, let me ask you real quick. Why is that?
because I could, because
Okay.
where the view was, I'm up on the side of a hill, and I get a 40-mile view, and I'm out in the sticks. I've got wild animals all around, which I like.
Yeah.
They seem to like me too. I give them plenty of bird seed and sugar water for the hummingbirds and so on. But it would have cost at the time roughly $75,000 to tie in to the grid. It cost me instead roughly $5,000 to build my own off-grid solar. I save $70,000 right off the bat, and I don't have power bills. So what's not to like?
Uh, that's true. Going along with that, I do see a lot of times, whether it be on the internet or even on TV, that, from power utility companies offering things about solar panels, or maybe not necessarily the utility company, but you hear these programs, we'll give it to you free or we buy back energy. Is that true? Is that real? Is that,
I would
these
be
solar panels?
I would be careful about these things. If you're leasing your roof to somebody, and a lot of companies want to lease it, they actually can put a lien on your house, and people have actually
Mm.
lost their homes because they weren't paying the lease on their solar panel or some other silly thing. If you're going to go solar, fine, make sure that you own it, that you have signed papers that say it's owned by you, it's not a lease, it's done. So it's very clear. So there's no risk to the title to your house.
Okay.
The other thing is, solar is nice, but I, well, my house is an example. I took pains to make sure I could make it as efficient as I could. It uses 1/10 of the energy per square foot of living space that most homes in the U.S. use. 1/10. So I could put a little tiny solar system in and power this house because the house is so efficient. You can do a lot. It's not unreasonable to think you can save 80% of your energy bill by making your place efficient first.
Okay. So
That's a lot.
So let's take the home efficiency right now, and aside from a new construction and existing, How
Okay.
would they do that? Would that be like making sure that you have good windows, insulation under the home, that kind of stuff, or things that, what can they do to make their homes more efficient?
Well, there are two things. I'll start with. In fact, I've got a fun little tool right here that I'll show you. It's called a FLIR One. It's a little device that plugs into the bottom of your cell phone. Okay.
Okay.
It makes it so you can see heat. You actually
Yes.
can. In fact, if I can take just a second here, I'll look up on my phone. Um,
I would imagine having that FLIR one, something like that on your phones, more than just neat. It's very practical. You can see where there's cold air leaks and stuff like that from your
yeah.
doors and windows.
So there's a cat walking on carpet,
Oh,
and you can
I
see
can
the cat's
see.
footprints on
Yes.
carpet. It's that precise. So yes, if you have one of these things, these are a couple, $200 or $300, not a big deal. If you have one of those, now you can actually see. Well, look at your house from the outside when you're keeping it warm on a cold night. You can see where all the heat's leaking out. Look at it on the inside when there's a difference in temperatures between outdoors and in. You'll see those things. Say you want to trace down a hot water line, you can see it. Say you have an electrical outlet where the contacts are not very good and there's arcing going on. It's about to cause a fire. You can see what electrical outlets are warm. You can look at your breaker box and see stuff where it may not be working right. There's a huge amount of good information, but that's just part of it. The With that information, then you go around, and there's a nice tool that, at least in my area, you can borrow them at no charge, called a blower door, and it basically is a large fan that you put at a door to your house and blow air in or out various ways. It will measure the cubic feet of air per minute that are moving, and you can calculate how much your house leaks. If you combine that blower door with this FLIR one, you'll be able to see easily where the heat's going, and then go around and fix those air leaks first. Don't insulate, because that just covers up the cracks.
Ah,
The,
okay.
the lowest hanging fruit is taking care of air leaks. Start with that.
I'm going to add, speaking of air leaks, I have noticed that around outlets that are towards the outside walls, you can feel air
Uh-huh.
coming through there.
Uh-huh. There are specific ways of dealing with that. Some people will just try to caulk them. There are gaskets that can be used. Various tricks. This website doesn't go into a lot of the detail of the how of fixing, but buildingscience.com, Joe Stebrick and Betsy Pettit have run this for years. They've sold it to their employees now, but they're still busy there. They're known for being sort of like the grandparents of building science in the
Mm.
U.S. And very straight speakers. So many people have guesses about how buildings work, but at Building Science Corp, they have measured data. They've tested everything. They've figured out the right ways of taking care of air leakage and vapor barriers and all this stuff. So working with that, all of this is about gathering good information first, and then it becomes real clear what your best path is for making your place work better.
Wow. You're making me think a lot of different things, especially along the lines of windows and maybe new construction homes, because I've seen this, and in additions, because I had work done and I watched them slap in the window, but they didn't take the vapor barrier to fold over to cover the cracks. They just slid the window in, and I was like, wait a second, shouldn't you put that vapor barrier, wrap it around, and then slide the window and those kind of things? So sounds like you really got to keep an eye out on things.
I think yes. I think, most people don't really have the understanding or depth of training in doing this very specific kind of work, how to make a building. It's not just making it energy efficient, but it's making it durable as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe you'll make a window so there's no leakage, no vapor leakage around it. But the most common place in a house to find rot is windows underneath them, because water gets inside of the wall there. Something didn't get done right. So,
Yeah.
part of having an efficient home is having a home that will last. Like I built this place, and this is going to sound like I'm loony bins, but I built this place to last 200 years. And I used simple tricks, like the flashing around all the roof, around all the house is copper sheet metal. Now, I could do that and have it cost less than galvanized, because I just bought the flat sheet metal at the supply house, took it over to the shop that bends it. They bent it to make it the way I wanted, just by the hour. They even let me help them, because I'm a general contractor, perhaps, but they let me help. And so that got done for just a few hours of time, and I wound up with the same shape flashing, but cheaper than if I had bought the inferior galvanized steel. That's just one start. The handrails around the house are steel pipe with a high chromium content rebar in it as the vertical pieces. With the sun I get here, I would have needed to replace the handrails already if they were wooden. So it's cheaper in the long term to have a really durable house.
Wow. Again, you're just making me think about a lot of different things. And I'm just going to throw this out. I'm not sure if it's really true, but um, I, I've met some Scandinavians, and they talked about their home and how they built it towards the sun, and they have like stone or cement type of flooring to gather the heat, and then it radiates in the night. And they tell me, it warms up the floor and it's good for practically all night. We don't really even turn our heater on.
That's totally valid. The the problem with the what I'll call the solar house, these were very common in the 70s, early 80s, is that overheating becomes a real concern. You've really got to figure out how to let the sun in when you want it. And, if you warm up all that stone or concrete, okay, good, it's nice and warm, but maybe you're now going to get too hot inside of the house. I built my house as a low mass house. Mass is concrete or block or brick or other heavy things. I built it as a low mass house and then have 1,000-gallon water storage tank. I use the sun to heat that water. That water moves by convection through radiant heating in the walls. Doesn't even need a pump. I went back to the old books and used old technology, gravity hot water. In the late 1800s, they were using that. They didn't have pumps, so they just used the difference in weight between hot and cold water to pump it, and it worked fine. I know it sounds strange, but you get the difference of fractions of an ounce of pressure is enough to make water flow, and water carries heat. So I have a low mass house with this high mass fluid that moves wherever it needs to bring heat to where it needs to go. Simple,
Uh,
quiet, uses no power.
we're really not talking about it really isn't about an alternative to, but it's really, like I said, about being sufficient. because
Yes.
as we were saying about the heating of the floors, it might get too hot. Well, it's not efficient because now you need to have electricity to blow cool air,
Right.
and you kind of defeated the purpose of everything. So, yeah, this is really about being efficient,
I,
and it's interesting how you're talking about some of these things about water carrying heat. I remember one of my friends, and they're still my friend, but his brother built a home and put in all these piping contraptions through the wall, but it was hot water. When he turns on the water, did something, it just carried heat and it warmed up his room. And
okay.
I thought that is just like the weirdest thing. And they had like fresh air coming from outside, and it went through something that warmed up the air.
Yes.
I don't know if it went through a hot water tank area or what it did, but he was just into something interesting. This is 30, 30, 40 years ago.
Wow. Nice. Well, years ago, I was involved with an outfit called Zomeworks in New Mexico. Steve Bear was the
Hmm.
guy that founded that with his wife, Holly. And Steve was a fan of elegant simplicity, because if you can make something work using the properties of the thing, like copper is great at heat conduction, much better than steel or other things. So instead of needing a motor or a fan to move the heat, he'd let copper do it. So no moving parts. The simpler you can make something, the more durable it's going to be.
Hmm.
Solar panels used to cost a whole lot, so he developed trackers that you could put solar panels on, and these trackers would follow the sun. And they did that without using any power. They just had canisters full of refrigerant. When one got hot, the refrigerant would boil over into the other one, imbalance it, cause it to tilt, and anyway, that was the basics of it. But his systems would keep on going for decades after all of the motorized ones failed.
Wow. Uh,
So that's become a real important part of it. Even if it's not as efficient, if I can make something that really holds up well, nobody has to maintain it. It simply works. Simple.
so sticking with the solar and solar panels, because that's something that a lot of people are familiar with, meaning that we've heard about it. Um, are there different efficiency levels of these solar panels where it may be a 100 watt or 1,000, but it only brings in, it's like 23% or 25% efficient? Uh,
Yes, there are. I would think that it's not important really to go for the most efficient. What you look
okay.
for is watts per dollar. How much energy can it deliver per unit of cost? That's
Okay.
sort of the gold standard to look at. By the time you get this thing and put it in, can it deliver 10 watt hours per dollar or one? You want the thing that delivers the best energy per unit of cost per dollar. So
Hmm.
that's really, you can get fancy high efficiency stuff. And if you were on a spacecraft and had very limited space to deploy your solar panels, okay, it makes sense there. But on someone's rooftop, it just doesn't matter. If you make the house relatively efficient to begin with, you're not going to need a whole lot of solar panels. When I first built this, I used both propane for some heating things like water, and used photovoltaic power for everything else. 1,800 square foot house that I built, I used 1,500 watts worth of photovoltaic. That's all. That's considered a tiny system these days. A lot of people put more than 10,000 or 20,000 watts worth of panel on their house. And a gripe of mine is that a lot of solar companies don't, when they're selling solar systems to people, say, hey, before we do the solar system sizing, let's figure out how efficient can we make your house first. If we do that
Okay.
first, you can save up to 80% of the solar. You can make it that much smaller.
definitely tells me pick up one of those FLIR ones and connect it to your phone and start looking to see where cold air is coming in or hot air is going out. Um, Another thing too is still sticking with all the solar panels and things like that. You kind of mentioned it about batteries to hold the energy that you collect.
Right.
And I don't hear about that when I hear these commercials about solar panels. All I hear is solar panel,
I
but I
know
never hear
that
about the.
because they're expecting the power grid to act as your storage.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but that means you may have solar panels, but if the power goes down in the grid, you still have no power.
Very good to know.
So not a really, you know. And the other thing is they play games with pricing. They may give you far less for the energy that you give them than they'll charge you for that same unit of energy coming back. So there are lots of games being played with power costs.
Mm.
In the not so recent bad old days, lead acid batteries, like are used in cars, were what we all used. They were called L16s. They were 6-volt batteries, big heavy things. You'd put a bunch of them together and create storage. These days, lithium ion batteries that weigh much less and are far more energy dense, so you don't need as many of them, can do the same thing. And for me, if I was lucky, I would get eight years out of a lead acid battery. Lithium ion, I think I've put I expect at least 20, probably
Mm-hmm.
better. So they're actually a more effective way of going. The upfront cost is much higher, but given time, the low upkeep, you don't need to add water to them, and you're able to extract energy from them over a much broader range than you can from a lead acid. If you take a lead acid battery below 50% state of charge, the battery's hurt by it. Lithium ion, you can go down to less than 20. So there's a
Okay.
lot more power stored that you can use. More detail than you may have wanted, but there we are.
There certainly is a lot to this about being efficient, being off the grid, and I'm glad we're kind of talking about this and clarifying that not necessarily when we're talking about off the grid, we don't mean hiding from the government or hiding from things.
No.
It's being self-sufficient, and in turn, I think it saves us, the consumer, the people, money, and we're not dependent about or relying on somebody else to give us whatever it is. But
And I'll just throw in one other thing about saving money. When I built this house, the going rate for construction in my area was about $250 per square foot of living space. I built this for $100 per square foot.
mm,
So
mm.
there's this misconception out there that being efficient has to cost more, and that's simply not true.
I honestly, I'm going to when we're done today, I'm going to look up to see how much one of the FLIR one attachment to my phone costs because I, I I absolutely know that I have hot air, warm air going out, cold air coming in, and like I mentioned, I noticed around my outlets. It was one time in the winter went to plug something in. I'm going, wow, this is really cold. And aside from that, ants. So ants must be getting through there.
Mm, yeah, and for the really big holes, the mice are coming in.
I hope I don't have that in the house. um, Larry, that's something else that I want to talk to you about real quick, if you don't mind.
Try it.
Uh, and that is going back to the hot water tanks and things like that. But hot water tank, that's the traditional versus tankless.
I A lot of tankless people have gotten mad at me because tankless, if you go back to the theme of elegant simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
tankless is going in the wrong direction big time.
Oh,
They're
oh,
far more complex. They have little computers in them. When they fail, people can't figure out how to fix them. some of the manufacturers are making basically substandard and unsafe things,
Okay.
and have been sued for it. I want something that, there are places where tankless should be used, where they make sense. If you have only very infrequent water use, like in a church or vacation home, they can make sense, because standard tank type heaters, if they're left stagnant for months, can start smelling bad. You get this rotten egg odor. But the sales pitch of unlimited hot water, actually, they're nothing other than in no case other than an industrial process do we ever need unlimited hot water. It's just, what are we buying here? So, and learning how to live with them. I know they've been doing it in Europe. It's how they do it there. It's what they grew up with. We can get better, easier, less expensive service from a standard tank. Even though a tank has greater standby heat loss, you can get the same savings, if you want, by having efficient plumbing, or by and I, by efficient plumbing, and I know this is a branch, but I just was involved in building a house, 800 square foot house, that we used 1/4 inch tubing for all of the hot and cold water distribution in the house. 1/4 inch is about what you would supply an ice maker with. We entered it into a competition. This was a high school I was working with for at risk youth, and we were competing against colleges and universities from around the world. We won first place because we built the most efficient, best, most durable house. This was called the Orange County Sustainability Decathlon, and we won. And part of it was because I got to do things like simple, inexpensive solar water heating, this manifold plumbing that uses 1/4 inch tubes. So, in worst case, it takes 6 seconds to get hot water at the tap. Most of the taps, it takes 3. So, better hot water service, less water and energy waste. Simple things can be done in design to make homes perform much better. And then there's nothing to maintain, nothing to really go wrong. And you
Oh
get
boy,
and you get cleaner water.
you just opened up another little can of worm. Of at least I'll cut it down to one question to ask you.
You're welcome.
And I know people have got to have the same problem. And turning on that hot water, and I'm waiting.
Right.
1001, 30 seconds goes by. Oh, is it better to turn it on full blast on hot, or is it the slow burn, so to speak? Because I just never know. I'm doing both things.
Okay, there are a couple of things going on. It's all just pure physics. First
Okay.
of all, there's a given volume of water between the water heater and the tap. That's based on the length and size of the pipe. The shorter you can make the pipe and the smaller diameter you can make the pipe, the less volume there's going to be. So, that's one thing. Most people are not in a position to replumb their homes. When they do need to replumb, say it's old steel plumbing, it's starting to leak all over the place. There are two ways of going. There's hot water recirculation, and done wrong, it's a pump that just runs all the time, losing heat from the plumbing all of the time. Done that way, you can triple your water heating bill. So that's not really the ideal. There's also an on-demand recirculation where you can hook up motion detectors or buttons. So when you know you're going to want hot water, you push a button or walk by a motion sensor. It turns the pump on, primes the main line with hot water, and then when you go to turn on the tap, you wait only seconds. So that saves energy and water, and that's good for big homes. It's good for homes that where you're not going to replumb anytime soon. Manifold plumbing, this kind that I use the 1/4 inch tubing with, which by the way, I got an engineer to write me a letter saying this meets code. That was fun. I'm not breaking rules here. I'm just bending them a little. When doing it that way, it's simpler in that there are no electronics, no moving parts, nothing. Just you turn on the tap, and you need to know what your water pressure is at the beginning. You need to understand you're going to lose some pressure down the length of the tube. All these things, but these are ways of saving energy and water and time.
Wow. All right. Um, we talked a lot about efficiency and a lot about water and hot water tanks. Aside from the Flare One and heat escaping or cold air coming in, before we close out, I was wondering, is there one other thing that you could tell everybody what they should do to um, be more efficient in the home, saving energy or whatever it might be?
Well, a real simple one, it's sort of one plus things. Look at your power bills, yet your energy bills. Look at the difference between winter and summer and shoulder seasons. When the furnace is running, or the heater, the boiler, whatever is running, how much is that using in winter compared to when you're not needing it? Just reading your power bills and getting at least a year's worth and comparing, you can tell what the big hits are. Where is your energy going? Another thing that's a really great diagnostic tool, it's a simple thing called a kilowatt meter. You simply plug it into an outlet and then plug whatever appliance, like the fridge, into that. It will tell you how much energy that thing uses over, instantaneously or over time. So pretty quickly, you can tell where the big hits are, where's the low hanging fruit. And that allows you to focus on, okay, oh, this 1975 avocado colored fridge that I have is an energy hog. Maybe I can replace that with something that uses a fifth as much power.
Gotcha.
Or you just, this allows you to see where the energy is going. Just like the FLIR one lets you see heat leaks, a kilowatt meter lets you measure. Most people don't understand that with the amount of television we watch, TVs use more power when we're not watching them than when we are. If there's a remote control, the TV's always on, sucking at the power straw.
Larry, I was going to say, I lied about saying one more thing, and you're leading into it. And I was going to ask you, appliances or whatever might be TVs, radios that we're not using that are plugged in, is it still drawing power? And
yeah, and some do, some don't. An old-fashioned toaster, probably not. A modern TV, absolutely. Anything that has a remote control is always drawing power.
okay,
But this is where that kilowatt meter can help, because now instead of guessing, I had a friend once that I was helping. He said, "Oh, I don't need that. I can just tell by the size of the cord that plugs it in." And he likes telling me that story now with shame in his voice, because the size of the cord has almost nothing to do with how much energy a device uses. But the kilowatt meter showed him, and this friend has cut his bill by 60% without any big changes.
well, you've sold me. There's a couple things I need to buy: the FLIR one and the kilowatt meter. Links will be put in the comments below.
Okay.
Well, Larry, I just want to really say thank you very much. This has been really fascinating. It's everything from the hot water tank being efficient, and I have definitely learned a lot, and I know that there's a lot that I need to do. So, folks, remember to go to LarryWeingarten.com, and that's just LarryWeintar. No,
I might be able to spell it. WEINGARTEN.com.
I forgot the Garten. Regardless, it's going to be in the comments or in the description for everyone. I've had a good time. This has been really a lot of fun and a great learning experience.
Good, good. There's a lot more where that came from. I've been doing this for 50 some odd years.
Well, again, thank you very much, Larry.
You've made this fun. Thank you.
You're welcome.